Welcome, friends. Globalization has brought in changes in organizational and stakeholders' expectations. In order to communicate these changes in a holistic manner, it is imperative that professionals be made aware of the correct usage of words and expressions in their professional communication. Communication is critical. It is critical in building and sustaining business relationships, critical to initiate transparent discussions with stakeholders and shareholders, critical to record what transpires and to document the outcome. We have designed this module to introduce the participants to the dynamics of corporate communication, government governance, and sensitize them to the efficacy of the written word. It aims to empower participants to establish and communicate their credibility and personal and professional effectiveness through demonstration of confidence and logical thought progression in business, communication, and correspondence. So welcome to the world of written words. Written communication, the final countdown. Why do I call it the final countdown? Throughout, we have learned what communication is. We know what barriers to communications are. We know how to overcome them. We have also by now understood what verbal communication is. How, when we talk, the efficacy of the words that we utter can make or mar a relationship, be it business or personal. Now, when we have to put down these things to words, even that is very important. In fact, that is the last leg of communication. The objectives would be to establish common concepts in written communication and to use these concepts in business communication. We come across in our day-to-day life, at workplace, we come across so many aspects of communication, of documentation. They could be letters, they could be minutes of the meeting, they could be memos issued, they could be notes, briefs. But what would be the common thread amongst all of these? The moment we are asked to write the minutes of the meeting, we just freeze. The first official letter that we are supposed to handle, we just wonder how to begin. Letters are also of so many kinds. Even the briefings done are of various impacts. So how do we find a common thread? So what happens when somebody asks you to document something? So what matters most to you over there? What matters most is the content. The moment somebody would ask, you would say, what is the content and who is my audience? The target receiver. Is it a client? Is it a consumer? Is it a colleague? Is he a senior? Is he a junior? Is it interdepartmental? Or is it for the public? For the shareholders? Because unless and until you define the audience, how you would put things, you will not be able to decide which mode of communication you need to employ out there. Once you know who your target receiver is, you would know the attitude. Well, you have to be courteous all throughout. But there are certain times when a bit of authority also is required. At times, you need to be aware of the authority to whom or with whom you are corresponding, communicating. So, the receiver of the letter or the memo or the briefing actually decides what your attitude is going to be in the written documentation. Length, again, is dictated by that as well as the issue which is at hand. So does it have to be a brief thing? brevity is important, or do you need to explain things? So what would be the nature? Clarity in the message again becomes very important. Now when I talk about brevity and clarity, what exactly I mean here is that you need to give the message very clearly. It has to be concise. That means every word which is there in the written documentation should have a purpose, and that is why it has been put there. Post that, we may include action required by what time. Now this gives the letter or the documentation or the document you are issuing a sense of completeness, because whatever has been mentioned, and if it requires an action, you need to have a deadline. You need to have a deadline to it. So be it any kind of documentation, any kind of document, the time frame, the location, the action required must be put there. And last but not the least comes the presentation. So now you have to decide what kind of document should be released. Does this issue warrant a briefing? Does this issue require a face-to-face communication, or does it require a letter, the formality of a letter? Will a circular, a memo solve the purpose? Will a notice solve the purpose? So that is where we decide the presentation of the document. Friends, what you are looking for is then content first, then the client, which tells you about the consumer, collaborator, colleague, concept, clarity, courtesy, correctness, and the completeness, correct whatever data you present in your written communication as well as oral communication. It must be correct. Written communication is documented, so it will go by your name, and therefore be very careful about these factors in written communication. Friends, we have discussed what letters are and how we should frame them. In the next part, we will talk about the basic structure, the format of memos, minutes of the meeting, and briefings. Here, we explored the common concepts in written communication and learned to appreciate the various forms of letters. Thank you very much.